President Trump's big night.
President Trump speaks before Congress, sharing what is promised to be a bold, optimistic plan for the next 4 years. I'm Wyatt Goolsby at the White House. I'll have details on what we expect him to cover.
We'll have complete coverage from the White House and Capitol Hill. A helping hand. The Italian government and Catholic Church help Syrian refugees escape danger. A teen's powerful message.
Abortion is a big deal, a very big deal.
My conversation with a 16-year-old pro-life activist responding to a controversial article posted on Teen Vogue's website. And cheerful faces.
In ogni offerta mostra lieto il tuo volto.
The Holy Father sketches out the signs we are following the path of God. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, February 28th, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. President Trump says the time is right for an immigration bill. Just hours before his first major policy speech, he's calling for a softening on both sides of the debate. The president told me and other television anchors at the White House this afternoon during a very cordial lunch that a bill could happen if there is compromise. And a senior White House official also suggested there could be a pathway to citizenship for dreamers, those children who are brought to the U.S. illegally by their undocumented parents. The White House says the president was intimately involved in writing the speech to Congress and plans to strike an optimistic and unifying tone. He'll address progress made so far in his administration, including executive orders, and will address challenges that remain. We have team coverage tonight. Jason Calvi joins us from Capitol Hill. But first, Wyatt Goolsby reports from the White House, where President Trump is finishing the final touches. Wyatt.
Yes, Lauren, President Trump is putting those final touches on his speech before he leaves for Capitol Hill tonight. It's not a State of the Union address, but the White House promises it will be a bold, optimistic speech with a look ahead to the next 4 years.
This is a landmark event, a message to the world in these dangerous times.
In his first address to Congress, President Trump is expected to lay out his legislative agenda. The big issues he'll talk about: increasing military spending, replacing Obamacare, and building up border security.
He doesn't issue modest orders.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions says he's ready to help the president crack down on illegal immigration.
People who come here unlawfully, who commit crimes, are going to be out of here. The law says they have to be deported, and we're going to insist that that happens.
But it will take more than tough talk to convince Congress. Republicans want more details on replacing Obamacare. Earlier this week, Trump said the health care law is a complicated issue, but he made this promise to the nation's governors.
We're going to give you back a lot of the powers that have been taken away from states and great people and great governors, and you can control it better than the federal government.
That's not good enough for Trump's critics, like former presidential candidate Bernie Sanders.
We have been debating health care in this country for 30 years, and he says, gee, who knew how complicated it was? He's maybe the only person in this country who doesn't know how complicated it is to provide health care for the American people.
The White House says meetings with healthcare executives, law enforcement, and unions have helped the president craft the policy he'll lay out tonight. President Trump is expected to travel around the country to talk about his agenda, specifically creating jobs. We know one stop will be a major industrial shipyard in Virginia, which will benefit from Trump's plan to boost the country's defense budget by $54 billion. Lauren?
Wyatt, you just left a press briefing there at the White House. What did you learn about tonight's speech? Anything else they're talking about?
Yes, Lauren, we've learned that the White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer is on Capitol Hill meeting with members of Congress just ahead of Trump's speech. Deputy Press Secretary Sarah Sanders says we can expect to hear the president ask Congress specifically for their help on a number of the big topics we mentioned, plus help him, quote, restart the engine of the economy, plus expand educational opportunities for students. Lauren?
Thank you so much, Wyatt Goolsby, reporting at the White House. President Trump's speech comes as Republicans fight over the best way to repeal Obamacare. So, how will the president navigate this complicated issue? Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi continues our team coverage. Jason.
Lauren, conservative Republicans are slamming a draft Obamacare repeal, which was leaked last week. They say there's no way it can pass the House. Speaker Ryan admits there's controversy, but says the GOP is still on track to make good on their promise. Tonight's speech could help settle this Republican dispute.
House Republicans are huddling hours before President Trump's speech.
Trump tonight will probably lay out some of the principles, we'll see, and we're waiting to see what that is.
House Speaker Paul Ryan says the White House and Congress are working together to repeal Obamacare.
And I feel at the end of the day, when we get everything done and right, we're going to be unified on this.
But right now,
Repealed and replaced.
not all Republicans are on the same page. Representative Dave Bratt of Virginia, who's a member of the conservative House Freedom Caucus, tells me he doesn't like what he's hearing.
Why don't you support this draft?
Because it's federally run health care, right? And so the feds are going to put in refundable tax credits, a new entitlement system. All of our entitlements right now are bankrupt, right? The kids won't get Medicare and Social Security in 50 years.
The pro-life issue could bring the GOP together. Republican leadership has promised the plan will also defund Planned Parenthood.
It's one of the strongest attributes, actually, because killing children is not health care. Republicans understand that. If anything, the provision strengthens the effort tremendously among conservatives that might hesitate on a refundable tax credit.
But as Republicans get marching orders from their new leader, Democrats are ready to challenge the new commander-in-chief every step of the way.
And the question is, will there be plans and details to match the rhetoric?
And Republican senators will meet tomorrow to hash out their strategy for Obamacare. Republicans in the House meet again on Thursday. Lauren, Trump himself said this week that nobody knew health care could be so complicated.
Yeah, we just heard Bernie Sanders' response to that. All right, thank you so much, Jason Calvi on Capitol Hill. I'll be there watching as the president makes his pitch to the nation tonight. Who else is going to be there, Jason?
Well, President Trump invited families of victims killed by illegal immigrants. And also tonight, look for the Democratic women wearing white as a message of standing up for women in this country.
Jason Calvi on Capitol Hill. Thank you, Jason. Democrats want to show the importance of equality and diversity at the president's speech tonight. They invited guests who they say were affected by the president's travel ban.
It is outrageous that we as Americans would turn away students like Sarah for no reason other than their heritage. And the reason I asked Sarah to be here is that I want President Trump to see with his own eyes the people he has hurt.
Representative Chu's guest, Sarah Yarjani, has a valid 2-year student visa but was detained for 23 hours at the airport in Los Angeles and deported. She re-entered the U.S. a week later. Joining us now is Matt Smith, president of Catholic Advocate. Matt, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
The White House is saying this speech is going to be big and bold. It's about the promise of the future. What should Catholics be listening for?
Well, I think Catholics are going to be listening for a change in tone. We've had the first 40 days that I think people are concerned about the tone of this administration starting off with. People of faith were excited that this president was going to come in, that he was going to defend religious liberty, that he was going to stand for the sanctity of life. And there's been some distractions. So I think that this is a chance for him to hit the reset button in a new format and talking not only to the lawmakers that are going to have to pass the agenda, but also out to the American people about what his agenda is going to look like.
You worked in the George W. Bush administration, and your role was to reach out to different constituencies, like Catholics, if I recall right. What do you think that this is going to be an opportunity for him to talk about faith, religious liberty? I have it from a White House official that, yes, that they think he will be doing that.
Well, I think, one of the things that also the White House was talking about today, he's not going to do what we've seen some other presidents do about check some different boxes for some different constituency groups. And I think the American people are a little bit fatigued by that. They want to see him defend our principles, like one of our most cherished, that of religious liberty. But then they're going to be interested to know what he's going to do to help those that are underserved, less fortunate out there, looking to find work and get themselves back on track.
What my executive producer always says is that, look, we're Catholics, but Catholic issues are everybody's issues.
That's right.
So you're right, in checking that box, that is not probably what we're going to see. Though, we probably would like to hear something about the HHS mandate. Do you think it's going away?
I would hope so. In these drafts of, repealing the Unaffordable Care Act, as I like to refer to it, I think that that's where we really need to codify protections for our religious liberty and our conscience protections. It has to be done in any sort of health care replacement while taking care of those who need health care, need access to health care, protecting things like pre-existing conditions and other facets that a lot of just, Catholics, people of faith want to see in a health care bill. But the first thing is to make sure that we have our conscience protections.
Sure, and you know what it's like to work in a White House and to have people coming after your boss. How do you think he's going to handle criticism tonight, and possibly criticism from the floor?
Well, I think it's going to be a different type of speech for him, because this is the first time he's speaking to Congress, and that's a different room. This is not a campaign rally. There's going to be the welcoming applause. One side will be polite, the other will be a little more raucous, and then everyone will sit down and start listening. That room gets very quiet. It's a lot different than a rally. There's not the normal interaction that you hear from a crowd. And so this is his time to really start leading Congress, leading our country, and demonstrating to the American people what can be done.
Well, let's hope we hear some respect, unlike the last time I was in that room and somebody yelled to President Obama, "You lie." Remember that? So
I do.
It'll be interesting to watch tonight, the level of decorum. Matt
right.
Smith, thank you so much, President of the Catholic Advocate.
Thank you for having me.
President Trump adds another member to his cabinet. Billionaire Wilbur Ross is sworn in as Commerce Secretary.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties
of the office upon which I'm about to enter.
of the office on which I'm about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Vice President Mike Pence administered the oath this morning, a day after the Senate voted to confirm Ross. The 79-year-old will promote business interests, American interests, overseas, and he will also oversee agencies that manage fisheries, weather, forecasting, and the Census Bureau. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world: scandal in the tech world. 5 Samsung executives, including the company's heir, will stand trial on bribery, embezzlement, and other charges linked to the takedown of South Korea's president. Lee Jae-young and others are accused of pledging tens of millions of dollars to win the favor of President Park Geun-hye. She was impeached and suspended in December. Samsung and Lee have denied the allegations. A mother in India mourns the death of her son, an engineer who was killed in an apparently racially motivated shooting in Kansas. The 32-year-old victim's body was flown home to India, where family members gathered to grieve. His mother says she encouraged her son to come home if he felt threatened in the U.S., but he said he wasn't in danger. The Indian External Affairs Ministry says this should not happen in one of the oldest democracies in the world. Immigrants flow into European countries or the United States, but they're also escaping danger by crossing into Canada. The Associated Press captured a video of this Syrian family crossing a small stream from New York State into Quebec. They were promptly arrested. A former police officer says that's exactly what they wanted, so they can be taken to a border facility to apply for refugee status, which they could not do if they entered legally.
If Canada can accept those people, I'd say, why not? If we can treat them right, if we can treat Canadian citizens right, and if we can accept these people, why not? If we can.
More than 1,200 people have crossed into Quebec for refugee status, which is triple the number from the previous year. The Catholic Church works with the Italian government to resettle about 50 Syrian refugees. A coalition of different Christian organizations brought the refugees into Rome by plane, saving them from a dangerous journey overseas. Vatican correspondent Mary Shovlin reports from Rome.
The refugees, who are Christian and Muslim, have been living in camps in Lebanon. They traveled to Italy on humanitarian visas and will be given free housing and education by the Catholic lay organization Sant'Egidio. The war in Syria is driving many of its citizens from their homeland, and Christians in the region are particularly vulnerable. The leader of the Catholic Church in Syria says he's not sure if President Trump will help Christians in the area, but he says at least the president is shedding light on their suffering.
He did mention from the beginning that Christians have been persecuted, abused in countries where Islamic radical Islam, or what we call the ISIS, the doctrine, were dominating.
Over the past year, nearly 700 Syrian refugees have arrived safely here in Rome, and more than 300 more are expected by the end of this year. All this as a 6-year civil war rages in their homeland. In Rome, Mary Shovlin, EWTN News Nightly.
Coming up, a pro-life teen speaks out to counter the culture of abortion.
I think a lot of girls my age just kind of follow what media tells them.
What inspired Autumn Lindsay to take a stand?
A possible giant step in the fight against cancer. An experimental gene therapy that turns a patient's own blood cells into cancer killers worked. It happened in a major study by the biopharmaceutical company Kite Pharma. 82% of the patients had their cancer reduced by at least half at some point in the study. The company plans to seek approval from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration by the end of next month. Teen Vogue, a magazine geared toward teenage girls, recently posted a gift guide to lift a friend's spirit after an abortion. But some pro-life teens are speaking out against that article.
The point of the article was to make the situation seem as lighthearted and nonchalant as possible in order to convince girls my age that abortion is no big deal. Well, we need to clarify one thing first. Abortion is a big deal, a very big deal. And to say it is not is simply feeding us a lie.
Joining us now is Autumn Lindsay, that 16-year-old student who posted the video. Welcome to the program, Autumn.
Thank you.
The article suggests things like watching a funny movie and downloading a Ruth Bader Ginsburg coloring book. It was incredibly flippant. How do you respond to that?
Yes, so I read the article and I was appalled. So that's kind of why I made the video. And basically, I just wanted to make the point across that, no matter what stance you have on abortion, in no way should it be taken as such a lighthearted issue. That was one of the main reasons that I decided to film the video. Just that the message that it's fun, it's okay, and it's acceptable, and you should always support someone I disagree with. And I don't think that teen girls my age should be fed that message.
One of the gift suggestions was a girl power hat. And here's what you had to say. Let's listen.
Girl power hat. Is this really the time for that? I just ended my baby's life. Girl power. Are they insinuating that girls who celebrate their abortions understand girl power more than girls who regret them or refuse to have them?
What is girl power and how prevalent is it in the teenage culture?
I would say girl power is not just being able to do whatever you want and, take control of every situation. I think being a girl is being respectable and being modest and being, able to speak your mind. But I think the way that they portrayed it is essentially just saying, if you don't agree with abortion, then you must not be pro-women. And I don't think that that's the case at all.
The Teen Vogue article didn't really address any solutions to serious counseling, to someone who has just had an abortion. You do have some suggestions. What are they?
I basically just laid out some, for girls that have had abortions, that there are resources out there, such as, the Rachel's Vineyard, which was it's a great organization, as well as, some pro-life hotlines, stuff like that, just so that, girls who have abortions don't have to pretend like it's a, a fun, lighthearted situation and that they should celebrate it. It is a loss, and that's what we should treat it as. So I think it's really important.
How has the reaction been at school or in your community to what you have done?
It has been overwhelmingly positive. I've gotten a lot of great responses. I was recently at a speech and debate tournament, and it was funny walking down the halls and having people ask me, "Are you the girl from the video?" So it's strange, but I'm really glad that I did it and be able to get that truth out. Because I think a lot of girls my age just kind of follow what media tells them, and a lot of what that is right now is the pro-choice movement. So I think it's weird for people to see a girl to kind of go against what culture is saying, because I think oftentimes what that's played out as is, oh, she's brainwashed because she doesn't believe what everyone else believes.
It sounds like you have a career possibly in advocacy. Thank you so much, Autumn Lindsay, for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next, Christian minorities in the Middle East persevere despite overwhelming odds.
These people have literally given up everything that they have because of their faith. And the one thing they didn't give up was their faith.
What the U.S. can do to help.
Christians in the Middle East hope the Trump administration will give them a helping hand. The Knights of Columbus say it would be a welcome shift in policy. Joining us now is Andrew Walther, Vice President of Communications and Strategic Planning for the Knights of Columbus. Thank you so much for joining us. What impact will President Trump's executive order on immigration have on religious minorities like Christians?
Well, the original executive order allowed for priority for people that were among minority religious communities. And in the Middle East, which is the area that I'm most familiar with, there's a definite impact on religious minorities that would include Christians, and they were targeted not just for persecution, but in many of those countries for genocide. So the effect of that in places like Iraq and Syria was to prioritize genocide survivors. Now, there was a huge reaction to the president's comments about prioritizing Syrian refugees who are religious minorities and Christians. And the irony of that is that the stated policy of the Obama administration was to prioritize religious minorities as Syrian refugees. Now, it didn't work, but that was their stated policy, and I have an email from the State Department from 2015 laying that out as the official policy of the Obama administration.
You say the lack of U.S. aid for persecuted Christians has helped ISIS. What do you want the Trump administration to do that the Obama administration did not?
Well, the Obama administration, after the fall of Nineveh and Mosul and the Christians fled to Kurdistan, those Christians there in Erbil got no money from the U.S. government, no money from the UN. I met with Yazidis when I was in Erbil who told me the same story. They had received nothing from the government with the exception of a single kilogram of lamb from the UN in 2014. That was it. And there are already signs that things might be changing. But what needs to happen is that the government needs to begin making sure that these minority communities that are in danger of disappearing are included in the communities that are getting aid. And I will say, in talking to an archbishop from Iraq this morning, he sees indications that there's already an opening and a change in attitude towards the Christians and the other religious minorities there in the region. And they're very hopeful that this will continue and concretize in ways that enable them to get aid, better take care of their people, help their people move home.
You obviously are in great contact with them. You spoke to some folks on the phone. You've traveled to Iraq twice in the past year. What is it really like to see people practice their faith under such difficult circumstances?
Well, you have a situation in Iraq where these people have literally given up everything that they have because of their faith. And the one thing they didn't give up was their faith. And so you have not, a heroic faith that is being lived out. You have an example to the rest of us in terms of what it means to live your faith in adversity. These people had the choice of convert, flee, or die, and they kept the faith and fled with nothing rather than give it up. And that speaks volumes to the depth of their faith. When I was with Congressman Smith there in Iraq in December, we asked a number of the Christians if this had made their faith stronger or weaker, if the experience of being refugees, one of them had been a refugee twice, evicted from Mosul, then again from Karakosh, and they all, to a person, said that it had made their faith stronger.
Andrew Walther is Vice President of Communication and Strategic Planning for the Knights of Columbus. Thank you, Andrew, so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Pope Francis offers a word of advice before we begin Lent. Remember, you can't serve two masters. The Holy Father says we must choose between God and money.
Del cristiano, cercare la pienezza, di ricevere la pienezza.
The Pope says a cheerful face and eyes full of joy are signs we are following the path of God. 8 people are closer to sainthood. The Holy Father recognized the heroic virtue of a group on the path to canonization. Among them is Bishop Otavio Ortiz, who founded a seminary in South America, and Jesuit priest Antonio Repiso, founder of the Congregation of Sisters of the Divine Pastor. To learn more about these holy men and women, visit our news partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. And make sure you watch EWTN News Nightly tomorrow for comprehensive coverage of President Trump's speech this evening. For all of us here, to all of you around the world, I'm Lauren Ashburn. Good night and God bless.